Hey, Uncle Doug.
Uncle Dan.
What we haven't had for a while is a good
Erection?
that lasts more than 4 hours. Now that would be a god to worship. If a god could give you some, like, turbo erections, I'm guessing that god would do very well. But what I'm saying is we haven't had a good god to recommend for people to worship for a while.
No, I think you're right. I think there are so many that are no longer with us that are worth looking at, and I think Uncle Mark's got one of them.
Well, and before I get to that, it always makes me laugh when they warn about the erection lasting more than 4 hours, because I think I had an erection that lasted from age 13 till about 19.
Yeah.
So that was more than 4 hours, and I didn't know I should call a physician.
As you've admitted on this show, Mark, you didn't take the proper action for too long.
Yeah, it was quite an unrequited boner.
I was an unrequited boner. I didn't touch the devil's wand for all those years. You guys were doing it. So anyway, that is hey everyone. That aside, as you guys were saying, it's been a while since I myself. You guys kind of do this more often, it seems, but it's been a while since I myself dipped my toe into the river of reason and knowledge that runs between living godhood and discarded, unloved mythical figures that separates reality from that mysterious patch of land we call the graveyard of the gods. So I thought I would visit that overcrowded ash heap once again after so long an absence and visit one of the more obscure graves near the back.
Oh, fun.
So for today's eulogy, that isn't quite a eulogy, as this guy's name weirdly is still evoked from time to time. You'll see. I found someone not fully understood by modern seekers because very little is actually written about him, and he is definitely a him. But he intrigued me nonetheless today, and I want to lay some very bloody flowers on the high mountain grave of Crom. So, Crom is the principal god of the pantheon of the long-gone Sumerian people. Sumerian with a C, like almost cinnamon. The Sumerians were a kind of proto-Celtic people dating back to the Thurian age, who settled in the rugged high mountain region once known, fittingly enough, as Cimmeria. Interestingly,
Uncle Doug,
yes.
Do you get the sense that Uncle Mark is making all of this up?
Pretty much everything Uncle Mark has ever told me in my life, I'm pretty sure he made up.
Even when I told him that he wasn't adopted. So
just stop telling us about the Thermians and the anyway, go ahead. Go on.
It's just history, guys.
The cinnamons and the... Yeah, okay, fine.
Interestingly, there are claims that this lost people are descended from the even more lost Atlanteans, which we've discussed before in episodes 52 and 15, and very unlike the submerged continent, references to Atlantis and its sister continent, Lemuria, keep bobbing to the surface in so many weird places we cover. So, for some reason, these sons and daughters of Atlantis fled their coastal and then suddenly supercoastal continent for the cold, brutal highlands of an Indo-European sort of range, and Crom and the cruel pantheon he oversees seem very much an indigenous idea to such a cold, unforgiving environment. So, now, listeners and you guys, you may recognize some of the other names in this grim pantheon, because as we've discussed countless times before on our show, every religion is just an evolution of the one it displaced, or more directly, when one is just fully inventing a religion, it's easier to plagiarize, borrow, and godnap than to start from scratch. So
it would be stupid. It would be stupid to start from scratch when there's so much good source material out there.
Yes, we're all standing on the shoulders of idiots.
So, Crom's moody, eternal sky is shared by Manan Maclir, god of the sea, Babad, B-A-B-D, the crow war goddess, and Morrigan, the phantom queen. So it's all a little nightmarish, and you could do better than having been born a Cimmerian in the Thurian age. So, back to Crom himself, who is Cimmeria's most eligible and least interested bachelor. It turns out his own name may actually be derived from the Celtic deity Crom Cruach or Crom Dub. I'm sure I'm nailing those.
God bless you.
He was a very old pre-Christian Irish deity associated with human sacrifice, who good St. Patrick is rumored to have driven out with the snakes. And worry not, listeners, we'll do a job on St. Patrick and what the snakes really were. Another time, it's horrible. But the Crom of the mountains...
It was the Jews.
It was the Jew, kind of, yeah. But the Irish Jews of the time. Yeah. But the Crom of the mountains, untamed peoples of ancient Cimmeria, has his own particular vibe. He is also known as the Grim Lord and the Lord of the Great Grey Mountain. What I find fascinating about Crom is his total divergence from the concept of the Father God shared by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, in that rather than a vain, preening, Trump-like figure desperate for constant affirmation and attention, lest he decides to drown the entire world in a hissy fit yet again, Crom could give a fuck. Even as the Father God of the Sumerian people, he's a supremely remote and emotionally unavailable father, as many of us from the mountain strongholds of Mormon country will find very familiar.
Like
right?
most dads, yeah, exactly.
Like most dads. So, in fact, Crom is not really worshipped in the classical sense. Despite being the main deity of a whole culture, he has no priesthood, no set prayers, no sacrifices of any kind, and no holiday in his honor. Much like the emotionally unavailable and even abusive fathers I hinted at before, the best possible relationship you can have with Crom is for him never to notice you. So I wonder if Doug finds something familiar in that.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's what one writer had to say about this remote god. He dwells on a great mountain. What use to call on him? Little he cares if men live or die. Better to be silent than to call his attention to you. He will send you dooms, not fortune. He is grim and loveless, but at birth he breathes power to strive and to slay in a man's soul. What else shall man ask of the gods? And again, because there's little known, there's this little known god is such a mysterious civilization. Here's the same author further explaining Mr. Sunshine. Crom was their chief, and he lived on a great mountain, whence he sent forth dooms and death. It was useless to call on Crom because he was a gloomy, savage god, and he hated weaklings. But he gave man a courage at birth and the will and the might to kill his enemies, which, in the Sumerian's mind, was all any god should be expected to do.
See,
So,
if Ayn Rand had known about Crom, she wouldn't have been an
Right.
atheist.
Exactly.
That's actually that's pretty amazing. That he would be a perfect fit for her, right? So the idea with Crom was that he breathed life into man, and it seems just men, male people specifically, at birth. And with that breath came all the strength, valor, and gifts a man would need to conquer and take all that he would in life. What you did with the gifts breathed into you when you first drew breath is your own business. Crom could give a fuck. And by the way, I found a keep calm and carry on graphic online that said Crom cares not, carry on, which is pretty hilarious. So. But that's not 100% accurate. It seems Crom cared just a tiny bit. As the author mentioned above, Crom respected valor and despised weakness. He was very rarely called upon. Again, best he didn't notice you lest he squash you like a bug for bothering him. But if he saw you squandering the gifts he breathed into you before he fucked off, he might just squash you out of shame.
Sure.
But if he noticed an insane amount of violence somewhere in the shadow of his realm, he may grant some strength, even inhuman strength, to be glorious in battle. Because as one of his greatest warriors replied when asked what is best in life, to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of their women. So that's nice, right?
I
guys?
mean, it's one of the great joys. I mean, it's up there, but I wouldn't put it above
the laughter of children.
Yeah, exactly.
Summer sunset.
A nice huckleberry ice cream is nice, but yeah, I mean, the lamentation of the women is good.
Yeah. It's a weird bumper sticker
I
to
think
have
it
on my car.
couples nicely with the huckleberry ice cream. So
Yeah.
we are fortunate to have a few more words from this warrior preserved through the ages, and it's in the form of a bizarrely rare prayer to this dangerous god. On the eve of a great battle in which he was absurdly outnumbered and destined to lose, this warrior dared to call upon Crom by name in a high-stakes gamble. And I quote, "Crom, I have never prayed to you before. I have no tongue for it. No one, not even you, will remember if we were good men or bad, why we fought and why we died. All that matters is that today, two stood against many. Valor pleases you, so grant me this one request. Grant me revenge. And if you do not listen, the hell with you."
Nice.
And nice, huh? Direct
That's a
quote.
good prayer.
And Crom did grant this psychopathically valiant warrior revenge as he vanquished the greatest Stygian knights of Set, including the one who killed his parents and enslaved him, the evil high priest of Set, Thulsa Doom, and he lived on to fight other epic battles. Luckily, history records this great warrior's name. He was, of course, the first Austrian governor of California, Arnold Alois Schwarzenegger, a.k.a. Conan the Barbarian.
Oh, nice. Yes.
That's right.
Crom!
So
Get to the
Governor
chopper.
Governor Schwarzenegger prayed this prayer to Crom in 1982's sort of underrated epic Conan the Barbarian, a film directed by John Milius and co-written by none other than Oliver Stone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and produced by the great Dino De Laurentiis, who, full disclosure, also produced a movie I worked on, The Army of Darkness.
Oh,
Yes, indeed.
So I am connected to Crom in some strange way. But that campy and very bloody film epic was adapted from the literary works of Robert Irvin Howard, who was an American pulp author born in Peaster, Texas in 1906, who invented not only Conan the Barbarian, but his race of the Cimmerian people, who lived in the Thurian Age, and sadly their not very nice father god Crom in 1932.
Oh.
So now, dear listeners, I hope you don't begrudge my little sleight of hand. Why would I lead you to believe this Crom fellow might have been a real god when he was, in fact, a total fabrication?
You did trick us. You tricked us. I feel tricked.
My notes say allow pregnant pause here. So Robert E. Howard invented the cruel, distant god to help sell pulp novels and comic books. Not so sinister a purpose, if you ask me. People bought them to enjoy losing themselves in Crom and Conan's merciless, violent world and of daring and magic for a while. And it was fiction sold as fiction by people who bought it as fiction just for fun. So our earliest ancestors likely personified the forces of nature in order to try to make some sense out of the terrifying forces that one encountered just by being alive. Not only things like earthquakes or lightning and floods, but illness, violence, suffering of all kinds. They also personified positive forces like love and abundance. And as people and societies became more complex and interdependent, in many places the elemental gods faded and more monotheistic ideas of a highly involved, unlike Crom, but impossible to please, very much like Crom, father figure emerged as the dominant idea. And as this sort of singular father figure, of course, needed a class of elites to speak to him and for him, since the notion of God was no longer dispersed into every corner of the natural world. So the evolution of God from explanation for the unknown to method of societal and personal behavior control by an elite priesthood has become complete. So, I mean, that's probably all a bit of an oversimplification, but that's the overall gist of how we inherited the shitty gods we still have to contend with today. They were all made up for some perfectly understandable reasons, like not knowing why any natural phenomenon happened, or to sell some fun fantasy novels, and some for cynical and diabolical reasons, like controlling women and making countless generations of people learn to inhibit themselves through shame and guilt. But they're all made up nonetheless.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, you say for good reasons or bad reasons. I say, ¿por qué no los dos?
right.
I say,
Yes,
you
why
can
not
make
both?
them up for both reasons. You can have the
Exactly
good
right.
and the bad in a beautiful, controlling religious sandwich.
And they can start good and end up very bad, and that happens so often it's impossible to count.
Like an uncle's heaven.
Like in Uncle's Heaven, it just, it turns so sour so quick. So as we lay this week's cruel god to rest in the fiction section of the Graveyard of the Gods, take a moment to realize that the whole place is just one big fiction section,
Right.
and it's getting new entries all the time. So rest in pieces, Crom, Lord of the Great Grey Mountain.
All hail Crom.
Crom!
Crom! Yeah.
Moving on.
Let's move on.